We're going to spend some time now talking about working with queries and something called functions and calculated fields and expressions. And it's a very powerful feature working with queries. So I think the easiest way to understand it is to just demonstrate it. We're going to create a new query, and I'm going to base it on the students table. And you'll notice up here under Query Setup, there are some features here. You can actually use these buttons at the top to insert columns or delete columns. We've been doing it manually, but you could actually use these. But we're going to focus on this thing here called the builder. And what it is, it's the expression builder. And if I click in it, you'll notice this screen. It's a little bit complicated, but once we look closer at it, you'll see what expressions can actually do. I think the easiest way to understand it is if I click the Access Help there. You see I clicked on Calculate Query Field and it gave me this help within Access. You can always use the Access Help to understand something better. Build an expression. To build an expression in Access databases, select the object or property where you want to use an expression and then press Control F2. This opens the expression builder. We've actually already opened Expression Builder. It's in the background there. And it's saying with this tool has lots of partially built expressions to save you time and built-in help to save you trouble. You can use expressions to do all kinds of things with your data. For example, determining how many days have passed since an order was shipped, or combining a first name and a last name into a full name. If you're an Excel person, think of expressions as the Access version of using formulas. If you use formulas in Excel, expressions are very similar in Access. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Things you can do with expressions. You can calculate an age. We said put first and last name together. Specify data pattern, crop characters. There's all kinds of things. There's just lots and lots of expressions. There's also mathematical expressions. They can do averaging, you can work with dates, etc. So I think the easiest way to understand that, let's look at some. So in here, you'll see expression elements. And these are the things that go into making an expression. And the builder just helps you build it. I think the important thing to look at in here are the actual functions within Access. And there's built-in functions. If we go here, the important thing is to look at this thing that says built-in functions. And first they put it by category. So there's like date time functions, there's math functions, there's text functions. And then when I go to a particular category like text, it gives me the expression values that work with it. So what we're going to demonstrate here first, let's say our name field, like our last name field, say we want it to display in uppercase. Right now it's the first letter is uppercase and then lowercase. There's actually a function that works with that. If I scroll down, it's actually this one. You can actually use either of these, UCase or UCase dollar. But let's look at these. When you click on it, it gives a little explanation of what the function does. So returns a variant of type string containing the specified string converted to uppercase. So to use that expression, what it's going to do when you're building it, it's going to put it in this area at the top here. So if I double click on it, there's the function, but it needs something that it's going to convert to uppercase. So if I go in here, the field I want to convert to uppercase is the last name. Now I could just put in last name, or you can actually go down here. It's giving you your tables, and there's last name. I can double click on it. It placed it in there. And it put brackets around it to indicate that it's a column in the table. But what it also did, it put in the table name itself. It put in students as the table, exclamation point, and then in brackets, student and last name. So with students in bracket, exclamation point, last name in brackets. If I click OK, there I've got my expression. And maybe I want to also see what the first name and last name looks like from the actual table. So I'm going to pull that down and run it. And you'll see it worked exactly like we wanted. It put the name in capital letters. Let's go back to design and talk about that a little bit more. So as the Access Help mentioned, if you want to see this again, you can click Builder or you can do Control F2, either way. There's the expression. It gave it a column name at the front here. You can always change that. Let's put uppercase last name. Click OK. And run it again. Let's expand that. So those are the parts of that very simple expression. I want to point out here too, let's go in, look at this. In this case, it put in the table name as well as the field within the table. Since you only have one last name field in the whole database, you really don't need the table. It doesn't hurt to have it, but let's take it out. Click OK, and it still works. So it sometimes is useful to have that table name in there as well as the particular column name, the field name. Especially if you have a database with many, many tables. So if you build a database professionally, you might build an Access database that has 30, 40, 50 tables, and you would start to lose track of fields, and you might have duplicated a field name. If you had last name in more than one table, you definitely would need to specify which table you're pulling it from. So that's how you build an expression. That was a pretty basic one. If you look in here, there are all kinds of expressions. Let's stay on names a little bit and look a little bit more, do a different kind of function. Let me close out of this. I'm going to get rid of that. Say we want to display a name, but instead of first and last name separately, we want to display the whole name together as one field. And you'll recall the reason we even broke those up initially, it's good database design to break down everything into basic components. So when we built the database, we didn't want to put first and last name together in one field, in one column, because if we ever wanted to break it apart, it makes it a little bit more complicated. But now maybe we want to actually throw them back together into one field. There's a way to do that, again, with expressions. So I'm going to click in here. When I click in here, I get the builder function. And so I'm going to use first and last name. I can select them from the tables here. Put in first name. But what I need to do, and here it's saying examples, it's you need something in there called an operator. So if I go down here, you'll see something called constants and operators. And the operators are just expression values that you put between fields. So there's lots of mathematical expressions. You can do plus, minus, etc. Or you can do the familiar less than, greater than. We're working with text, and in this case, I need the ampersand is something that works with text. So ampersand is going to append the first name to the last name. Let's go back. And I'm going to show in here, since I stated earlier, we really don't need the table name in this case in our database. I could actually just type it in. I could find it in the list here, but let's do this. And if I move that over, you can verify that that's what it's called, last name, end of bracket. Click OK. And so I've got the expression there, first name and last name. Let's run it. And you see it looks good, other than there's no spacing in there. So that part is not good, but I can fix that. And what I want to do is what's called hard code a space in there, or put in an actual space. And the way I do that, the quotes indicate what I literally wanted to display in there. So this expression, and by the way, let's rename it and just call it full name. So our expression here is full name, colon, in brackets, my field, first name, and then appended to a blank space, and then appended to the last name. And if I run this, now I get exactly what I want. It's the full name that was calculated right in my query. So that's an example of some powerful things you can do with expressions and calculated fields. In this case, this is a calculated field. I didn't use any functions. Earlier it was a function. This is just a calculated field based on columns in my table. I'm going to show here, say I misspelled it slightly, or I'd used lowercase. First name and last name, it's very similar, but it's just misspelled slightly. That actually does work too. If I go back, luckily it's able to know that. But what if I misspelled it, just left out a letter? It's thinking somehow it's a parameter and it doesn't recognize it. That's not what we want. So let's fix that. I would encourage you to if you have upper and lower case, use it that way, and then there'd be no confusion. And one other thing you can notice about what I called hard coding of data in here, maybe we wanted to say the full name is, I can do that. Let's put a space in there too, end quote, and then make sure there's a connector, the ampersand, which connects text. And so this is what it's going to say the full name is. Let's run it. And there you go. In this case, we probably really don't need to say that kind of text because the column name says full name, but I just want to point out how that works. So we'll talk more in the next video about calculated fields and functions and expressions. I think it's important, and there's lots of useful ones out there.